Hello, good morning, and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and my fellow Forest fan from across the Atlantic, Richard Spray. Better stop it there. I'm going to get in copyright trouble even more than ever. How you doing, Richard?
I'm doing great, man. That was couldn't ask for anything more than GNR. Kick it
Well,
off.
you know, I thought I did actually have another track that I was going to play, and following the events of last night, I thought we need something a little bit more meaty to get us going. And I know that you're not feeling particularly great this morning as well, so I hope that has woken you up. So, yes, we're back for another morning after the night before, again, directly after Nottingham Forest demonstrated that their early season form is not just a flash in the pan. 3 goals, beating Leicester in their own crisp bowl, back-to-back wins, and up to 5th in the Premier League. If Carlsberg did Friday nights. On the panel to enjoy this one, Richard and I welcome resident statman Danscape, and returning to the channel for the first time since he was in the guest chair for an episode of The One With, we're thrilled to have the pub landlord himself and one half of Tricky Tree Travel, our good friend, Mr. Alan Merryweather. Awesome. Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Alan. Alan, how are you this morning, Alan?
I'm slightly hungover, to be honest, Greg. Hanging out my backside would be, I think, the right saying. Yeah,
love it.
Great.
Love it. But
great to get the weekend. Have a great weekend without worrying about football.
Amazing, Daniel. How are you, sir?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I don't know. Have we ever done a win on a Friday and a win on a Monday?
I don't
know. But what a week!
In our history, we may have done, but I'm not sure if it's been in the Premier League. But we're going to get into all of that. Don't forget, if you are watching live on YouTube, please do let us know you're here. Join in the chat, drop your comments. Hopefully, you'll come along and say hi. If you don't say anything, if you don't drop a comment, then we won't know you're here. We want to put a shout out if we can. And of course, maybe you're listening to this later. Maybe you're out having a nice jog around the park or walking the dog with your headphones on. You might have that bath out again with the aromatic candles, relaxing after, maybe resting your weary head as you get up after a few bevies last night or something similar. If you are catching this later, either on Apple or Spotify or indeed on the YouTube playback, thank you very much for listening and for joining us as well. All right, we've got a quiz question for you. I like to try and pop a little teaser in. There it is. So, quiz question. What was the exact date that Brian Clough became Nottingham Forest manager? So, have a think about that. Specifically, what was the exact date? It's a famous date in our history. What was the exact date that Brian Clough became Forest manager? It's on the ticker tape across the bottom of the screen. Don't forget as well, please do hit like and subscribe. It helps the numbers. We would love to try and get ourselves to 1,000 subscribers by Christmas. We're just under the 800 mark. For everyone that's liked and subscribed our videos and content so far, we salute you. Thank you very much for doing so. All right, enough of that. Let's get into the game last night. Let's have some general thoughts about the game. Obviously, we went into it unchanged, which was something that we were talking about beforehand, thinking how we're going to line up. So, team unchanged. What are your general thoughts about how that game went, Danscape?
Positive team selection. We weren't sure whether we might tweak the wingers and play a slightly more defensive setup. So, pleased that the lineup was positive. We went there with obviously the benefit of having points on the board that we can kind of say, well, let's go for it. We're not desperate to cling on to a point away from home, so let's give it a go. And the first half was entertaining because it was open. momentum kind of swung a bit between the teams, and we got off to a really positive start as well. So, yeah, I enjoyed the first half probably as much as the second half in some ways as a game, because it felt like a derby. It felt like a bit of an open game, so it was good.
And Alan, you, as our regulars might remember, you have your pub in Leicestershire, and lots of Leicester fans frequent your fine premises. So tell us about the kind of build up to kind of the game, how you and your punters were possibly chatting. What were they thinking about from a Leicester point of view? And I think you had the bus arrive before kickoff from Tricky Tree Travel. Tell us about that.
Well, all week, to be fair, the lads have been speaking about it in the pub. They've been quite buoyant on the back of a couple of good results, starting to see a bit of a difference in Cooper. And then yesterday, obviously, pre-match, we had the Tricky Tree Travel bus come in, and loads of Leicester fans, and it was brilliant. And it was exactly how pubs should be. It's exactly how football should be. That's what we should be doing, having a laugh and a joke with each other, chatting about the match. And it was a really good pre-match. And then the game itself, well, we'll get onto that later, but brilliant. I totally agree with Dan. Great lineup. I'm a little bit out of the loop being in Leicester. I don't see the team so much with the local news and stuff, but they're brilliant. So pleased.
Yeah, Richard over in Oklahoma. Again, you were able to tune in and catch the game as we were from our lounges and so forth. Were you surprised it was unchanged? I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we have talked regularly about what is Nuno going to do, and I think literally now it's, it is a guessing game. It's always been a guessing game, but it's more so than ever. He's gone unchanged. Domingos had played the full 90 against Palace and had a decent game. Same with Yates. So it wouldn't have been, out of the question for James Ward-Prowse to come back in, especially as he's not going to be available against West Ham. That's his parent club, and he's on loan, so he can't play the West Ham game. So I kind of thought he'd feature, but no, he went unchanged. What did you think about that, Rich?
Yeah, I think we kind of anticipated something like that with, as Dan pointed out, potentially slotting Jota into the right wing in place of Elanga, just because of Elanga's struggles recently, and his form hasn't been great. But you can see he was up for it. He was ready to play. I think he knew he needed to step up a little bit, and he did. And Callum Hudson-Odoi, which I'm sure we'll talk about even more so. But I was very pleased with it, just because something about the way that we operated in that last match against Crystal Palace clearly made Nuno think, like, this is the right chemistry. This is the right makeup for what we need to do, even in an away match. And, the proverbial perfect match for someone like Yates, to shake things up a bit, dominate the middle of the pitch, create a little bit of difficulty for their team. And all of those elements just sort of converged as it did against Crystal Palace, and made us formidable, made us difficult to break down. And so, yeah, it was like Alan said, it's a phenomenal performance. It's no fluke anymore, like you mentioned, Greg, right? We're now seeing it unfold before our eyes. This is who our team is, and we're a team to be reckoned with. I don't think we're going to go away. So I just think the way that we operate is so stout. And so hopefully it continues. Hopefully there's not some massive or some 180-degree turn, but I just don't see it. I think the way that we set up it's too hard to see that happening.
You mentioned Elanga there, Richard. I wonder, Alan, you go home and away week in, week out. Alan, what have you made of Elanga this season? He's had a little bit of criticism here and there. Is that fair, do you think? And what did you make of him last night?
I think the work he does off the ball is great as well. I think he jumps into spaces and leads people away. I'm a big fan of both of the lads out either side. My issue really sometimes with Hudson-Odoi, just checking back rather than running, hitting the line and putting a cross in. But I think Elanga's he's not been brilliant, but he's been absolutely steady, and he's a good outlet. He really is.
Yeah, I think last night we saw more of that, didn't we, Dan?
Yeah.
I think Elanga possibly had his best game for a little while. He was definitely more winning. I thought he looked lively. There was a stat that came up that he was crossing the ball by far more than anyone else. So was this a little bit of a turning point, Dan, for Anthony Elanga?
I think both these two games he's been the most advanced player on the pitch for us in terms of average position. So he's been the outlet. Against Palace, he couldn't really get much joy. Last night he got a little bit more opportunity. He didn't quite take advantage of a couple of one-on-ones. He did draw that foul against, I think it was Pereira, didn't he, where he got kind of took out. So I think he's still probably just missing that like 5% confidence that he needs to get past the last man and get his goal. But, you know, his pace is just always going to worry teams. It's always worth having him on there as that advanced player because the other team has to deal with him. So it's not always about what he does. It's what he perhaps stops the other team doing, which is risking bombing another player forward. And that helps us defensively, you know, like Alan's saying. So he does a lot for the team.
And perhaps I think if you look at, you look at opposing fans, they are always worried about our either side. If you have a look at any of their Twitter feeds or anything, they always say they're the danger, they're the outlet. They don't necessarily mention Wood. It's, you know, the two wingers.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've mentioned it before that Nuno in pre-season spoke about we don't have enough wingers, and obviously we had the purchases of Jota, Silva, and Ramon Sosa, and we'll talk about them in more detail later on as well. But Nuno's got a very set style of play, I think, and I feel that one of the great things about Forest this season is our newfound consistency. We struggled certainly in season 1 and season 2 back in the Prem. We had some great moments, some great wins. We beat Liverpool, we beat Arsenal, we beat Man United, we beat Newcastle, but the consistency factor just wasn't there, which is why we found ourselves languishing in relegation battles. And we always said, if we can just be consistent with our performances, be consistent with the way that we play, we have an identity now. And that is evident on the pitch, isn't it, Richard? In terms of the setup with the wingers. I mean, I know that we haven't always played wingers. And I mean, the Fulham game was a game in itself. And on reflection, I think Nuno might have gone in a different direction, especially now we know what Elliot Anderson can do in the 10. But the centre-back pairing is there in place. He's now got the set positions with or settled guys with the fullbacks, even though Nico's knocking on the door. The changes that come later on, which again we'll talk about with Morato and Williams coming in, the two wingers switching out, the fresh two wingers switching in. You know, it's like a tag team operation. It's a newfound consistency and it's a specific identity that is helping Forest on the pitch, isn't it?
100%. Yeah. I mean, you could see moments, the body language coming from the Leicester players. You could see they were just getting frustrated. They're like, they didn't even have any clue how to break down the middle of the pitch in the second half because they kind of dictated the flow of play in the first half. In the second half, we kind of corrected, made adjustments, and made it even more narrow. Made it difficult for them to get through and have any, I think, reasonable opportunities in the second half. And it like you said, it's the way that both tactically and just the way that the players are reacting to the plan itself and the strategy itself, even within the course of the game, and making those corrections, like I mentioned, and then finding a way to just frustrate teams and not allow them, even if they kind of dictate possession, which they did. I mean, they were 60 some odd % possession percentage. So they kept the ball, but they just weren't really doing anything with it. And so, I mean, at some point that's got to be frustrating. And that's what's great is that as soon as those moments happen, it kind of lulls them into a little bit of lack of focus. And then we counter, right? And we've got the players, as we mentioned, with Alanga and with Callum Hudson-Odoi, to be able to orchestrate that on the wings and be able to put a lot of stress on the opposing defense, even to the point of which a Sells, ball over the top just drops perfectly in for Wood to score because I just think they're feeling a little bit lulled into a lack of focus. And so I just love the way that from front to back we operate. It's so much different, so much more, as you mentioned, it's much more cohesive, more awareness, even making corrections from game to game too, because Murillo kept making errant passes last match and he didn't do that in this match at all. And then Alanga wasn't doing anything in terms of pressing and moving up the pitch and coming to the ball and then turning immediately around and using his pace to his advantage as he should. But he did that in this match. So the way that we're realizing, as Dan pointed out, just a slight percentage increase on each individual, and you're going to see a completely different team, even though we've been playing so brilliantly. But yes, I agree with you. Comprehensively, we know who we are and we know how to keep that
Can I just come in on
match
that,
after
Richard?
match.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
So obviously we're talking about Alanga and Hudson-Odoi, but then we're forgetting, because they're so worried about the wide players, you look at how creative Anderson's been in the middle, and he's getting that little bit of space.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's exactly right. We will touch on Anderson in a few minutes as well, but I want to quickly just say hello to Tim Eason in the comments. Hi guys, he says, great win last night. Never seen a Forest team look so together. What Nuno has done is amazing. Even watching the training videos show that all the players are happy. He also goes on to say that the January window is going to be really interesting. Apart from a striker, can't think of anywhere else that needs to be addressed. And I probably would agree with that. The striker situation is still kind of hanging around, and we'll perhaps talk more about that in a little bit. I want to just go a bit more deeper than on the first half, Danscape, because it was a bit of an open game. It was a little bit more end to end. For the neutral, it was a great watch. And I was sat there thinking, I think we're allowing Leicester to have too much of the ball. And they seemed to be the ones that had a bit more possession, and then we scored. So great goal from Ryan Yates. He stepped up. Did that goal come at just the right moment in that half?
Definitely, yeah. You could hear with the game was pretty exciting from obviously even a neutral point of view. You could hear Jamie Carragher was making all sorts of weird noises on commentary. Every time something happened, he was sort of going, ooh, and stuff like this. So it must have been exciting. And it was open end. Momentum swung. I thought we started well. They came back into it. They spotted those gaps in the middle and managed to get in behind our midfield. And then we obviously got the goal a little bit against the run of play, and a little bit out of nothing, a kind of obviously a scrappy sort of move. Well, their mistake not clearing the ball.
Yeah,
classic kind of thing that you learn when you come to the Premier League, that sometimes you are better just hoofing it away, and otherwise teams just punish you. And we've become one of those teams. I think that's what's really good. Is in the past we were the team making the mistake by not clearing the ball. Now we're the team that can nick it, and we've got quality of players and players that have improved, like Yates, that are going to take advantage of that and give us a chance and we'll score basically. So although like Leicester did perhaps control it, looked good, breaking in behind our midfield, they didn't actually create a lot other than their goal. There wasn't a great deal whereby we were doing a lot of last ditch tackles when they got near the area. We still snuffed them out most of the time. So yeah, it wasn't one where I was sort of worried that we were going to lose at that point. It was just an enjoyable kind of first half where I wish we'd obviously held on 1-0, but it wasn't one where I was too worried going into the second half, I don't think.
What about you, Alan? Thinking about Ryan Yates, I mean, what more can be said about Ryan Yates? I've run out of things to say. I just think the guy's absolutely wonderful. Him scoring that goal last night, I'd said in the pre show that I felt that it was a game for Ryan Yates, and I said he's going to score, so I was quite pleased to get that one right. When he scored that goal, what was the feeling like in the away section, Alan?
I think the really nice thing is everyone loved it was Yates.
Yeah,
he gets it. I think you look at, there's only one or two other players that you'd think be on a similar trajectory. I mean, you look from Northern League to Premier League. I'm like you. I'm just out of words for him. I think he's brilliant. And listen, it's interesting. One or two people are saying, Thomas Tuchel should be giving him a ring. Not a chance. Leave him with us. Hey, he's good. He's not that good, but he's. Do you know how sometimes it's like Cooper? Sometimes you just get a fit, and Yates is that fit for us.
Yeah, he is. He's Forest through and through. He does, he does a job. But his ceiling that people talk about, he's got a ceiling. He's smashing through that time and time again, every time. And it's funny because I know that you've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with England, Alan, and I think a lot of us might have that as well now. And so, yeah, I'm selfishly wanting Ryan Yates to focus on Forest, but I'd love him to get a call up. I don't think it's going to happen, but he is the type of midfielder. I mean, I know that Matt Davis said this a long time ago, but he's like the Forest Jordan Henderson. He's got those attributes that Jordan Henderson had, where he goes about, he runs midfield, he gets stuck in. People always slag Jordan Henderson off, but he is what was and remains, maybe not so much now, perhaps because he's at the end of his career, but an absolutely fantastic player and really integral to how Liverpool ran. And Ben Foster on his podcast spoke about Jordan Henderson in a Watford game, and all the Watford players coming off the pitch astonished at literally how much Jordan Henderson shouted and spoke and orchestrated the team, and all the players listened to him. And I think it's the same for Ryan Yates. His ability to lead from the middle and control the game now has gone up a level. When he gets on the ball now, he's looking forward. You know, in the Palace game, I think it was Danscape that he had the most passes, if you in a progressive sense, like third out of all the players. So, you know, it's an incredible achievement for Ryan Yates to time and time again show that he is not just a Premier League player, but a very good Premier League player.
He's benefiting from being he's the more box to box of the two midfielders in that setup with Dominguez as well. So I think Dominguez helps him show that ability going forward, which we don't always see. When he has to replace the defensive holding role, then you don't really see it, and he looks like a sideways player. But if you give him the chance, he's become very direct.
There's more to him. So if he gets that call up from the England manager, then we'll see. But the thing that frustrated me, Richard, was them equalising fairly quickly after we scored. It was the kind of goal that we just haven't been given away. I love Nico Dominguez, but he really should have been sticking a leg out to try and stop the cross. But it all came about with Leicester managing to beat our press. Chris Wood was just about to nick it off the toe of Harry Winks, and Winks got in there first. And all of a sudden, it's like the middle of the pitch opened up for Winks, didn't it? And you could drive a bus through it almost, and that was concerning. So he's marauded forward, made the pass, got inside, and it was Winks, in fact, who crossed it for Vardy. So there was a lot wrong there from Forest's point of view, wasn't there, Richard?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, and Buonanotte as well. He was a problem in that first half, and he had way too much space to operate, just like Winks did. And you saw Milenkovic was sort of in between Murillo and Winks, obviously coming down close to the end line and crossing it over. And he kind of like hesitated for a split second and kind of moved to his left away from goal. And then the ball came through. I think had he continued to move forward and try to get in front of that shot or that pass, he may have had an opportunity to do so. So yeah, it was unfortunate. And then Murillo didn't really have much of a chance. I mean, Jamie Vardy's he's a very savvy, seasoned striker, knows where to position himself, knows how to get in front of a pass like that and put it in the back of the net, which he did. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great moment. I was kind of feeling, oh great, here we go. This is going to be another Brighton scenario where we're going to kind of like eke out a draw. But thankfully that wasn't the case. And thankfully the second half we came alive and realized what we had done wrong and kind of corrected ourselves and advanced from there. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but didn't really matter in the end, right?
Well, look, I mean, you mentioned the Brighton game. I was there for that one, and we got that early goal with Chris Wood scoring a penalty, and then it was those two sloppy goals at the end, and we just seemed to kind of regress in ourselves and didn't really kind of get going. And the difference in this game is that, like you said earlier, Richard, they seem to be learning from where they've gone wrong previously. They certainly didn't put any kind of heads down. In fact, we should have scored, shouldn't we, Alan, with Dominguez? I mean, their goalkeeper pulled off the save of the season, didn't he?
Can't remember.
No, it was. Bless you. Those pints of play. It was the shot in the first half where the ball's broken to him just about on the 6-yard box. And he's absolutely leathered it. Yeah. And their keeper's just flung himself Schmeichel style. Dan, maybe you remember it when he's flung himself Schmeichel style and got his knee on it. I mean, that I thought was 2-1, right?
Yeah, like 99 times out of 100 that goes in. It's kind of, it's a good save, and it's also a bit of luck that the way Dominguez connects, it just hits at his leg height and all that. So yeah, great save, and Dominguez will be gutted that he hasn't got his first goal of the season. That one.
We needed to pick things up in the second half, and what was really good was that Nuno's clearly gone in there and said the right things, and this is where his manager's tactician brain has come into play, Richard, because he's made some tweaks. We got the early goal in the second half, and from that moment on, there was only one team. Leicester had more of the ball in the first half, and Winks was running the show, but we closed it out very early on with those adjustments that Nuno made, and Wood scoring that second goal. And what a goal it was, Richard, eh?
Oh, my goodness. Well, what's interesting is that oftentimes we've spoken about Taiwo being better with his back to goal. right? He's got a little bit more physical presence. He's got the ability to turn somebody on the defensive side and score, because we've seen him do it. But Wood's doing that now. I mean, all of a sudden, he's starting to add elements to his game for a guy who's been historically a pretty good striker. I think he's got, 76 goals in the Premier League now. I mean, absolutely incredible. And I mean, he himself has more goals than has as many goals as Manchester United this year, which is remarkable. But yeah, he's adding elements to his game where he's holding up play. He's dropping off a give and go pass to someone like advancing like an Anderson. Just the way he's playing holistically is really incredible. And that goal, I mean, I think I had David Prutton on the broadcast when I was watching it, and he said what was really incredible about that is he knew exactly where the goal was, and he wasn't even looking at it. That's how much he has continued to progress under Nuno, is that he has this innate sense of space and positioning that's just remarkable. And I don't think he's going to slow down. We're sitting here talking about how we're worried that we're not getting goals from anyone else. We obviously got one from Ryan Yates, which was fantastic. But he's scoring goals like that. And as you mentioned, Greg, he took advantage of the opportunities he was given in this match versus the last one where he had a couple of clear and evident opportunities and didn't finish. And in this one, that wasn't the case at all. It was phenomenal. Yeah, the pace of it, curl. I mean, it was just...
It was an absolute world-class striker's goal, in my opinion, because he's taken it with his back to goal. He's literally just had one, maybe a second touch, and turned, and he, like you say, he knows where the goal is. He's curled it round the player, used the player to curl it in, hit the post. Keeper had no chance. And Alan, what I loved most, I mean, you might not remember this, but maybe when you get a chance to watch it back, is Chris Wood's playing against one of his former sides. And there are a few former sides for Chris Wood, to be fair. But that thing about not celebrating against your former team, completely out the window. He's run off like he scored a World Cup final. I mean, how amazing was it to see Woody score that goal?
And the crowd just went bonkers. It was brilliant. And like you say, it was straight down there. And I've noticed on Twitter today, someone took a photo of the knee slide. The mark is left on the pitch. Brilliant. But amazing. I think something else on Wood, the nice thing is we're allowing Taiwo to get fit. Yeah. You know, we're not rushing him straight in like we did last year. So we will, inevitably, something will happen to Wood because that's just Forest. But the nice thing is we're allowing Taiwo to come back at his own pace. So with Wood playing as he is, obviously, you can't drop him. You can't drop. And I think it's interesting we're not bringing him off.
Not so much. I mean, I know he came off late last night. He came off. Taiwo did get 10 minutes, but it's only 10 minutes. And you know, he just looks like he's in the form of his life, Dan. So he had, in my memory last night, he had 2 chances, scored 2 goals. So he scored the great goal, which was the turn we just talked about. And then again, showing his versatility, Dan, with the way he's, you know, physically up against Fass and able to sort of challenge him and nip in and just think that over. He's an intelligent player, isn't he, Dan?
Yeah, he's exactly what a team like us need, I think. We're not going to create loads and loads of chances, but if we create 5 chances, there's a good chance he gets a hat-trick from that. That's the reality, and that's exactly what we need, because we're not going to dominate possession. We're not going to create huge number of chances for different players. So I don't really know what Fass was thinking, and the goalkeeper was thinking for his second. Really, they both got it very wrong. Fass always just seems to make crazy decisions whenever I see him play. I don't know how he keeps getting picked first choice for anybody, and I don't know how he's ended up in my fantasy football team either. But yes, because he's cheap, I think. But yeah, I think, you know, it was kind of, even with that one, Chris Wood knew where the goal was, because he didn't look. He never once looked ahead to see where the keeper was or where the goal was. Again, it was just like muscle memory. He's kind of like, right, well, I'm here. If I get this contact on it, there's a good chance it goes in, and it goes in. And I guess that comes with the fact that he's, you know, 32 and he's just been doing this for 20 plus years or whatever, hasn't he? So, you know, we're lucky to have him. We can talk about Taiwo coming in. I hope he does get a little bit more game time, and I'm sure Taiwo doesn't like just getting 10 minutes at a time to build up his fitness. But, you know, what can you possibly change about a guy who's going to, you know, score you a couple of goals a game?
Yeah, he looks more... Oh, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I'll come to you one second. I just want to quickly say morning to David. He's an amazing win for us last night. He was at a wedding, only able to see parts of it, but he did see the third goal. So the groom, and plenty of others were very happy. And Richard, what is your wake-up juice this morning? I mean, I know that it's, now we're hitting 5 o'clock in the morning at Oklahoma. You aren't feeling too well. You've got a little bit of man flu going on. So what are you waking up with, Richard?
I went for the American Classic, which amazingly my brother got addicted to when he was over here. Gatorade.
Oh,
so we always seem to have it in the house. My son loves it, so we've got it lying around everywhere, it seems. So yeah, Gatorade. A little sugar, a little electrolytes this morning to get myself hydrated.
you were gonna come in on the Wood Taiwo thing.
Well, I think last night it to Dan's point, I think the way that Taiwo looked last night was different. He looked a little bit crisper. He looked a little bit quicker, which is a good sign, right? To what Alan said, where we have the luxury of saying, okay, gosh, we're worried about the striker position because if he gets hurt, if Wood gets hurt, then we're really in a pinch. Which I'm sure they would address that if that were the case. But ultimately, and I'm sure they got a contingency plan for that. But it was nice to see him bully some guys off the ball, nick a ball back from one of the midfielders, or I think it may have been the left back, and then take it. And just the way that he sprinted up to, I mean, I know he didn't have a great finish. He kind of shot it into the side net. But it was good to see him at least look a little bit more like himself. So that's only good for us, because going forward, if he can start to contribute goals as well, even if it's only for 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time, that's only going to continue to help us progress as a team. So we definitely need him. And I know we've said that. I thought he was dead in the water. It just seemed like he wasn't going to be part of the team going forward and have much impact. But clearly I was wrong. And it was just good to see him kind of look a little bit more lively.
But yeah, with Taiwo, he's had those injury problems. And does seem to be taking a while for him to come back. I thought he looked his sharpest last night. It was just 10 minutes. Well, in fact, it was 17 minutes because we had the added time as well. So he had, time to run his legs. But is it still an area, do you think, Alan, that in January needs addressing? I know that you just mentioned invariably Wood might pick up a knock. He might have to miss a game. We've got Taiwo, who looks like he's now back to near fitness. He says he's fit. So we've got Taiwo to come in. But let's suggest that the worst happens and Chris picks up a knock that takes him out for 5 weeks. It's happened to Morgan, and then Taiwo comes back and he breaks down again. We've had that worry about the striker position. Do we need to address it in January?
I'll be honest. I was delighted we didn't go for our third, fourth, fifth choice striker in the summer. I'm glad we kept our powder dry, and it's bought us a little bit of time. Wrap Wood up in cotton wool, do whatever we need to do to get Taiwo fit. But yes, I think it's a January thing, but let's not knee-jerk. Let's look at, you look at some of the bargains we picked up. What was it, 17 million for Taiwo? And, we're not going to lose on that deal, are we? And I would rather it's just look, and obviously that the higher up the table we get, the more choices we get of a striker.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we didn't buy one towards the end of the transfer window. And yes, it's something that we need to improve on. The longer you stay in this league, you need to replace those players. We need to replace good players with better players.
Yeah, I think we've been doing that. It's interesting, Dan, that in the summer, Forest, the news coming out of Forest, or the sounds coming out of Forest, was that the likes of Marmoush and Jimenez weren't what they would term second or third choices. They went after Nketiah, didn't get Nketiah. Then Jimenez was on next man up. That fell apart, and Marmoush was there. And they weren't saying in any way, shape, or form it was choice 1, 2, or 3. They had them all pretty much on the first choice page, but you can only really kind of go for one rather than going for all three. At one point, it looked like they were trying to get two, and which one was it going to be? So where does that leave them in January? Do you think they're going to roll the dice and go the whole season with just Taiwo and Chris Wood? Do you think they might bring someone in? And if so, how much of a difference will it make us being in the top half of the table in terms of player we attract?
I don't think you're going to be able to sign the striker you want in January now. That's very rare that happens, isn't it? Obviously, we got Chris Wood, but at the time, nobody necessarily wanted Chris Wood. It was kind of like, well, he's available, and it was a deal that could be done. So I think you're better off waiting until summer. Particularly, let's be realistic. We could be going into January in sort of 10th place in the league, points on the board. And then you could say, well, even if we did get an injury to a player, we're not going to be at threat of relegation. We might be disappointed that we can't continue the form we've got, but you might as well wait till summer and get the exact player you want. And I think there's a few players that'll probably become appealing after the end of this season, like Liam Delap at Ipswich, for example. If they go down, he started very well, and he could be very much a Chris Wood style striker. And you sort of have to wait for them to go down to have the opportunity to sign him. So if we did anything in January, it'd probably be a loan, just to have the body.
Yeah, or you find someone like we've got a good recruiting team who's scouting South America, right? Maybe there's something that we pull out of there, so that he's a young guy that's part of that sort of developmental process. I know, Dan, you've touched on this previously about Chris Wood becoming a mentor to someone. Yeah, I think we're all a little distracted by the comment from Paul.
Yeah, I want to say, morning, Paul. Paul's been listening whilst out running, and Paul wants to know: do we know if there are any reports of red knickers raining down on the Leicester fans after we scored last night? For those that are confused, go back and listen to the preview show. That I had dreams about those red knickers, Paul. I tell you. But yeah, that was a distracting moment. We more of the same, But thinking about January, I mean, I think that Tim is right when he's said earlier about possibly not needing to address any other area, and it only being the striker that we do look at. It wouldn't surprise me that we don't do anything. I mean, I know that's a big thing to say for Forest. I mean, we have been the mover and the shaker in all the transfer windows. But with how settled it's looking at the moment, Richard, we've got Sangare to come back. We've got Danilo to come back. We've got Gibbs-White to come back. So the starting midfield that's been out of action still to come back. We've got Anderson on the up. We've got Jota, everyone's favourite, with those Angry Bird eyebrows. We've got Ramon Sosa, who looks a player. He's still adjusting, but he looks a player for definite. Nico Dominguez, starting again to show everyone what a good player he really is, and we can talk more about him in a moment. Ryan Yates, proven the doubters over and over again. James Ward-Prowse, we know why he's been brought in. He's on a season-long loan. It's all about spaces in the squad, and are we likely to see anybody depart? I guess, we don't want to lose anybody, Richard, but, all of a sudden, one or two of our players might be attracting attention. So thinking about January, what is your kind of crystal ball telling you?
I think the only player that I continue to come back to that I think is a very high quality player who we questioned maybe he was going to get a start is Nico Williams. And he garnered interest from abroad in the offseason. He's done nothing other than not having the opportunity to start a lot of minutes, get a lot of minutes and getting a starting position in that first 11. But when he comes on, he impacts games, and I think he shows. And he's also very he's shown well in his international duty as well with Wales. So he's definitely a player that I think will be on people's radar if they're looking for a guy who's versatile, who can play midfield, he can play left back, he can play right back. I mean, he's got the capability to do that. He's got good pace. He's good on the ball. So there's a lot to like there, and I'd hate to lose him because he's one of the original signings we had from the first season in the Premier League, and he's just a brilliant guy and a brilliant player. But I could definitely see someone like that coming for him and paying a pretty good amount of money for him to pry him away from us. That's the only one I could definitively say I could see leaving that I think would end up with a starting spot somewhere else, which then leaves a hole. But then you've got Moreira as well, playing with the B team. So you've got some coverage there. I don't know how much he's ever really played at left back, but I definitely think that he's a piece that might be the one that's the only one I could think of that, definitively, like I said, that I think would potentially depart.
So thinking about the way that the team's kind of evolved since the start of the season with the injuries and so on, do you see a way back into the team for Sangare? I know that he's been under the spotlight, and I'm not writing him off at all. I was really impressed with him in pre-season. He's got that unfortunate injury. He started the season in the team. He was looking more lively, but we haven't missed him. I mean, I say that with love and with respect, but the way the team's been playing and the players that have stepped up, same with Danilo. We haven't missed him as much as we thought we might. We obviously want both those players to do well and come back to us. But Sangare, Danilo, they've got a battle on their hands to get back in the team, haven't they?
But surely that's what we want.
We do.
What will Cooper say? Next man up. Next man up. Let's look at the amount of times we've had that first season, the amount of injury problems we had in that first season. And I think the nice thing about this season, we haven't been hit as hard, although we have, obviously with Danilo and Sangare. But that first season, what was it? I think there was only Chelsea had more injuries than us in that first season.
It was horrific.
So I think you've got to keep your minds up. And you look at, let's go back to Yates. Who'd have thought Yates would have been playing? So if they're playing well, you've just got to play better to get in. Once you get in, keep that shirt.
Danscape, back to the game. Second half, the tried and tested 70-minute change where we've, at that point, 3-1 up. I mean, Leicester were offering nothing, but Nuno still went with the switch in for Morato and Nico to come in. So going to that 3 centre-backs and just solidifying the centre of the pitch even more. And yet again, we're on Morato watch at the moment. The Forest are yet to concede with him on the pitch. So it's a tried and tested formula. Would you like to have seen Forest do something different and maybe try and get a full? I mean, I know that let me stop myself because we still had chances, didn't we? So let me ask it in a different way. Were you happy to see us go to 3 at the back in the same way as what we've done previously?
Yeah, I thought it'd probably be 10 minutes later. I thought we'd maybe wait another 10 minutes. We did it at sort of 70 minutes, I think, didn't we? And I thought it might be a little bit later in the game, but it works because the opposition almost fall into the trap of throwing players forward and leaving the space for our 2 wingers to come on. So it's almost like like plan A is that you put the extra centre back on. The opposition think, right, we can get rid of one of our back line now and chase the game. Then we bring on Sosa and Jota, and they get more space because the opposition have chucked another player forward. So it almost encourages the opposition to do exactly what we want them to do. And it did create another few chances for us in a similar way to the Palace game. And Morato's not conceded on the pitch. I don't think we've conceded when Jota's on the pitch either in the league. I know we did against Newcastle, but so he's kind of got the same record as Morato as part of that team of 3. So and he actually makes a crazy number of tackles for a player in his position. I think he's got more tackles per 90 than like Dominguez. It's crazy considering when he comes on, he just gets involved in absolutely everything. So he did that again. He would have loved that atmosphere of a derby game, I'm sure, based on his style of play. So it suited him. But it's just a shame, we didn't kind of make it like a really notable scoreline of a 4-1 or a 5-1 in the end.
Well, based on the fact that we've only been scoring singles in games, apart from the Brighton match, I mean, to score 3 away from home against, they think that we're rivals, but against Leicester, it was still a great scoreline. But Richard, thinking about those changes a bit more, so specifically the wingers, we take the 2 off, we bring the 2 on. I mean, I love the kind of way this is working. It's almost like it's there. We're not hiding anything. Anyone who watches us can see that Nottingham Forest bring Morato and Williams on certain minutes, and then are generally taking both wingers off and bringing another pair on. So it's not like we're trying to hide anything. It's that identity I was talking about. It's that way that we're playing. So this is what we're going to do. We know exactly what we're going to do. We're not worried about what you do about it, but this is what we're going to do. So Sosa and Jota coming on. I mean, I can't say anything else about Jota Silva. The way that he plays, no one throws himself on the floor better than Jota Silva, I will say, when it comes to getting fouled. Yeah. He's got that Portuguese flair in him that maybe...
It's like a petulant child.
I know. That's where he goes down. But it's like, talk to us about the impact of Sosa and Jota on the game last night, Richard, and when they came on, because it almost looked like those two were trying to set each other up, didn't it?
Yeah, we said too that they sort of come as a pairing, right? There's a sort of synergy between the two of those players that when they come on, I don't think there's been a match that I've seen where they haven't had an opportunity to potentially score, especially late in the match where we think, okay, we're just going to kind of bide our time, just kind of see it out. But in reality, they don't see it that way. And I think Kelvin Wilson was the one who said on Force Focus, he's like a burst balloon, right? That's how he operates. He's just all over the place. But he does it in such an interesting way where it creates chances for our team to to continue to put the ball in the back of the net. Now, granted, unfortunately, there wasn't the finishing there, but yeah, Sosa's a real interesting player. You don't lose a lot of traction between the way that he operates and the way that Hudson-Odoi operates. Hudson-Odoi is clearly a better player at this point in his career, but the way that they play, I don't think is too dissimilar. They're both really good on the ball. They both can find spaces. They can both cut inside. They can do various things to create problems for the opposing defense. But it's just a remarkable sort of weird dynamic between the two of them, that when they come on, somehow, some way, there's always a break, right? And they get on that counter and they try to find each other to score. And I think Jota had an opportunity at one point as well. He came over to the right and was bombing up on the right with Sosa coming and got in the ball, and he was coming across to Jota. It didn't end up in the net, but that seems to happen time and time again. It's kind of like in a hockey match, right? I don't know if you guys watch ice hockey, but there's always these different lines, right? So they have these set pairings of lines, and they always seem to bring them in together because there's something about the way that they operate, and that's what it reminds me of. That's how they work. It's a specific line that we have that includes Murado and includes Nico Williams. So it's really interesting.
It's definitely working. One man who is taking the headlines at the moment is Chris Wood. All over Twitter, the stats galore about how many goals he scored since Nuno came in, and he's second only to Erling Haaland, as if Erling Haaland is the Messiah incarnated, of course. We know his goal scoring record is there to see. But I think what the fuss is that Chris was 32. And whilst he's been a bit of a seasoned Premier League player, it's almost like I think he's in the best form of his Premier League career, Dan. And you've pulled together some interesting stats, as you usually do. So I've put them on the board. You take us through, Dan, what you've come up with. Remember, there's some people listening, so if you could be a bit more descriptive, as you usually are, that would be great. But talk to us about Chris Wood.
So this is the current season's striker conversion rate. So basically, how many of their shots, be them on target, off target, so how many of their shots end up in goal as a percentage? Jamie Vardy's actually the top at 40% based on these numbers, which Sod's Law is from last night when he only had probably 2 shots and one of them ends up off his toe and goes in. Otherwise, Chris Wood will be top of that list. So Chris Wood's on 39% conversion, which is 10% more than Haaland so far this season. So although Haaland's got his 10 goals, he's had 34 shots, whereas Chris Wood's got his 7 goals from 18 shots. So, he's just been much more efficient. And it's basically a case, what this tells you is, if you're watching Chris Wood play football and he looks like he's about to shoot, you might as well just get up and celebrate, because more than 1 in 3 is going to end up in a goal. So you might as well just start celebrating as soon as he even looks like he's going to shoot at this rate.
Fantastic. And Premier League strikers' performance versus expected goals.
Yeah, so this is the XG, and then you sort of plus or minus with the actual goals they've ended up scoring. So Chris Wood has scored 3 goals more than the XG would account for. Haaland scored sort of 3.5 more. I guess you could look at this and say, well, because sometimes when people outperform the expected goals, you look at it and say, well, it can't carry on forever. You can't keep outperforming the kind of average of what strikers do. But at the minute, Chris Wood is kind of 3 goals ahead of where he's expected to be, because he's, again, every time he shoots, it pretty much seems to end up causing a problem. So hopefully it does continue. It'll be interesting to see that number, how it evolves over the season. If he keeps up the form, let's see where he ends up in terms of the sort of veteran striker rate in the Premier League, which I think is the next slide, is it?
Yeah, before we do that, I just want to, for those listening, on these slides, interesting that Brian Mbeumo is featuring just below Wood as well. He's having another good season at Brentford, and his XG is still pretty good. Other names like Cole Palmer and Luis Diaz feature, but there is one more slide as well, which is the age 32 and over stat for Premier League strikers.
Yeah. I've very much, obviously, this is manipulated to the exact age that Chris Wood is, but this shows you where he's at so far this season. So for any striker age 32 or over in the Premier League, according to the numbers on FBref, the goals per 90 rate, Chris Wood is currently higher than any striker's ever been. So he's higher than Gianluca Vialli, who alongside Ian Wright has currently, got the most goals per 90 across the season. He's higher than Jamie Vardy from 21-22. You've got Hasselbank on there, Olivier Giroud, Les Ferdinand, Solskjaer, Sheringham. Danny Welbeck's giving him a run for his money this season. He's not doing too bad. Ronaldo's down the bottom of the list, Cavani. So Chris Wood currently is the best 32 or over striker that we've seen in the Premier League based on this season so far. The challenge is obviously he's got 20 whatever games left to keep that up to stay top of that list. But again, we can keep an eye on that.
And there's one more slide you put together, and this is going on to Callum Hudson-Odoi, in fact, because he's been very creative and continues to be. So Premier League shot creating actions per 90, Dan.
Yeah, so Hudson-Odoi is 6 on that list of all the players in the Premier League in terms of creating shots for their team. So he's in the mix there alongside Salah, Diaz, Palmer, Son, Kulusevski, Saka. So he's involved in a lot of our shots, and I think that's because he's such a neat and tidy player. He rarely gives the ball away. For a winger, you compare him to Elanga, they're kind of complete opposite kinds of wingers. He's so neat and tidy, and yes, that means sometimes he cuts back, but he just seems to always retain possession, jink past his man, give it to someone else, and that, in our style of build-up, obviously for a team that doesn't have a lot of possession, when you do get the ball, you don't want to give it away cheaply, and that shows that he's been involved in 37 of our shots so far, and that's right up there with the best that we would consider in the Premier League. In better teams, generally as well, they're in top 6 teams, and he's snuck in there right in the middle.
Well, we are top 5 teams.
Oh, we are, yes.
and yeah, you see Saka, Kulusevski, Son, Palmer, and Diaz names above him, and Hudson-Odoi above Salah, and Eze, and other players as well. I mean, Alan, where Forest are right now, we're sitting 5th in the Premier League table. We know that there's obviously the games to follow. This weekend there's going to be every other team playing after us. So if we end up in 5th at the end of it all, I'd be surprised. But as it stands this morning, Nottingham Forest are 5th in the Premier League compared to season 1 and season 2 and the previous 23 years. As a seasoned Forest fan travels home and away, how are you feeling about it all, Alan? I mean, just put it into some words for us about what kind of emotions you're feeling this morning off the back of another away win against Leicester, where you live and work and you've got your business. How are you feeling this morning, son?
I think the only time I felt like this, to be fair, is when we went up the season we went up. I think I'm loving the team, at the togetherness. You look at the 3 lads dancing at the end of the game. There really does seem a togetherness in that team, and I think I've been a little bit critical of the fans this year. I think we've not been on form, and I think you look at last night. It's little things like that could be the trigger that gets the fans back on board. I'm delighted. I'm just waiting for that bubble to burst. I'm me, Greg. I'm the eternal optimist, but I'm just thinking we can't do it, can we? We can't keep going like this. But I think our success has been built on that back line. That back line is phenomenal. Milenkovic, Murillo, Aina, and then I just find that team is gelling so well, but it's based on that back 5.
And you've perhaps heard me say, Alan, on previous episodes that I'm putting that opinion out there that Nikola Milenkovic is our best signing in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And again, I'm saying it again because we've had some great signings, Murillo and MGW, but the difference that he's made has put us from being 17th, 18th, 19th to now 5th in the Premier League, because that back line, as you say, if you've got your 2 centre backs playing well, like Jamie Carragher said last night on Sky Sports, it's a really good and interesting thing he did say for a change. He's always said if you get your 2 centre backs are playing well, no matter how everyone else is doing in the team, that is the foundation to still get results. And Richard, you said earlier, Murillo had been a bit sloppy against Palace, but last night he just went about his business tidily. No frills last night. He was really kind of like as if to say, right, this is a game where we need to just be on it, do the basics properly. Milenkovic and Murillo and Moreno and Ola Aina. I mean, I can't tell you how much these guys are meaning to me right now, because they're just playing for the shirt. And Yates is a Forest person through and through. Yeah. But when you see Ola Aina and Hudson-Odoi and Alanga and the way they dance and celebrate. Now, they're the heartbeat of this team now, Richard, aren't they? So where can it take us, Rich? You know, the bubble might burst, but can we possibly be thinking about buying our tickets to Bratislava or somewhere else in the Europa Conference League next season?
Man, that's it feels like Greg Mitchell type optimism, Alan Merryweather type optimism. But yeah, I mean, at this stage, you can't rule it out. I think the thing that you notice, as you mentioned, the word togetherness is, you brought that up, Alan. You just said that as well, Greg. That was being thrown around, I think, as well when we were watching the videos during preseason. There seemed to be a different air about the way that they were operating as teammates. Buying into Nuno's strategy and plan and set up for the team as a whole, a culture that he was developing. There's a certain mental fortitude about the way that we operate now. There's a consistency in particular with match after match with what Aina's doing, what Milenkovic is doing, what Murillo's doing. Murillo may have the isolated moments as a young center back would, where he's going to be a little bit errant with what he's doing. But for the most part, he flipped a switch from preseason to regular season, and he's just become, I hate to use this sort of American sports term, but lights out, right, in terms of how he's operating. And that little section makes you feel like no matter who's in front of us, we can continue to play well. And that kind of continuity and that consistency of play, as you've said, Greg, makes me feel like we have a shot. Right. I think I made the statement a few weeks ago that, hey, we may not be the most talented compared to, say, a Manchester City or someone like that, but we're never going to be easy to play. We're never going to make it easy on you to score and or win a match. So, and I think that's a mentality that has shifted with the way that we play this season. So from my perspective, yeah, we may have a stinker here and there, like a Fulham where we lose 1-0 where we probably shouldn't have, or a Bournemouth where we give up a goal and we end up drawing when we shouldn't have. But for the most part, I think we're going to continue to be our performances will be the consistency. And I think that back line, like Alan mentioned, is essential to that. Be interesting to see what happens with Moreno. Is there going to be a switch? Because he was a little off last night in moments as well. And he kind of is getting worked over by some of the good players that operate on that side of the pitch. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes. But the rest of that back line, man, you can't even, I don't know what else you can say about them other than they're just absolutely spot on every match. So,
Richard, can I just say, pick you up on that? I think you're absolutely right, but just remember where we were 15 games ago. 15 games ago, we were worrying whether Burnley and Luton were catching us up, and now you look, that back line. Forget a league position for a minute. That back line is cemented. That back line that's the foundations we're building a team on. And I understand what you're saying about Moreno as well. I think it's been a revelation. His first game against Liverpool,
I mean, last night he got that booking, and actually I worried a little bit, but he actually went on and played really well still, I thought. Yeah. But it's the Milenkovic factor. That's why I say he's the best signing in 25 years. The Milenkovic factor has pulled that back line together. So just before we finish, we've in the preview show, and even in this show so far, one thing we haven't talked about, and quite deliberately, we haven't talked about Steve Cooper. And I don't really want to talk about Steve Cooper because it's about Forest, it's about Nuno. But there was a moment last night coming through the TV screens, Alan, when all the Forest away fans, they pulled out the Steve Cooper chant. And it was obviously with 3-1 up, and it was more to dig at the Leicester fans, I thought, than anything else. But, he's not going to be forgotten. I know that you hold Steve regard in high regard, in the biggest of regards, but, how much of a factor was the Cooper conversation in and around people that you were speaking to in the week ahead of the game? Did it come up at all?
Well, if we go back to the chant, I think there was dual meaning there. There was a bit of piss taking, but also a respect.
I thought so too. It was like, we want to sing your name because we didn't get a chance to say goodbye.
Yeah,
and we're only going to do it if we're winning.
yeah. Did it sound like? How did it sound on the TV?
Oh yeah,
loud and proud.
Really?
I mean, the fans last night were really loud and outsung Leicester. I mean, I was pleased that they sung it because I thought maybe he knows as well, and he found it really difficult in the build-up and any other time to talk about Forest. I thought it still hurts, doesn't it, Dan? You can see it still hurts.
Yeah, that's the impression I got in his pre-match press conference, as well as yesterday on the TV interviews and stuff. It felt like he just wanted to skip straight over the question, which is fair enough. Look, it must be difficult for him the way it obviously ended at Forest. It wasn't on his terms, his choice, after everything that he did. And I'm sure he's been a bit hurt by some of the comments afterwards, whereby sort of trying to rewrite history on what he managed to do for us. So it's his choice though. Now it's kind of his choice to go to Leicester. He's got to try and do the best job he can do there. And I understand that side of it as well from him, just saying that's what I'm focused on, because he's got to prove himself there to a point. Otherwise, his career goes in a different direction. So hopefully he does well in a way for them.
Look, what I will say, just to be balanced, Leicester on 9 points. Their start to the season isn't horrific when you look at there's teams below them. So, I think he's got credit in the bank from their point of view. I wish him well. Certainly not when he plays us, and we got the win last night. So it's obviously easier to say once we got that. Had we lost it or something else, then I wouldn't be saying that at all. Clearly, I'm a fickle football fan after all. But it's all about Forest. It's all about what we do. I want to say thanks ever so much to everyone watching.
Sorry,
you can jump in.
I'm really sorry, but I don't know if I don't know what it was like on the television last night, but we all stayed after all the players went on. The place was absolutely empty, and Moreno came and started taunting the Forest fans. I don't know if you've seen that, and it was quite funny because he was coming over, he was going, "Oh," and then he was giving it the fist bump, and I just thought that was brilliant.
And that's what you want. You want that interaction with the players and the team. You want that link. You want that relationship. You want the joyous feeling after a victory. I mean, why wouldn't you? It was a joy to watch, and those players that are on loan seem to be integrating themselves as if it's their club. And I think we'll sign Alex Moreno full time. But look, those guys in the chat, David and Tim, you joined in, and Paul Morley as well. Anyone else watching and listening along, thank you so much for stopping by. Richard Spray over in Oklahoma, go back to bed, get some sleep. Thanks for joining us as ever at this early hour.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Thanks, guys. Great to see you. And Alan, awesome to see you again, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, and you, Richard.
Alan, hope that your hangover is possibly going to be a thing of the past. Maybe go and have a Bloody Mary if you haven't had one already. But
I'm off to work. I'm going to have a beer.
You're going to have a beer. Alan, thanks for joining us. It's great to see you again. Danscape, thank you very much for your input as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very
That's
welcome.
It. No, nothing else to say.
No, okay, so then we'll leave it there. It's been a fantastic start to the weekend. We can all sit back now and enjoy the other matches. We can all be happy that Forest are sitting currently fifth people in the Premier League. We'll be back next week for the West Ham preview show. But Reds, enjoy your weekend. This is Talking Reds. We'll see you soon.